Keruvan Saranai, blessings of the Noble Triple Gem. On behalf of Vishwaniketan, it is my pleasure to warmly welcome all of you to this special dialogue held during the sacred Vesak season. In January 2026, Vishwaniketan initiated a new reflective dialogue series entitled Mind Sky, a Dhamma breeze for a bruised mind, a space created to gently explore the challenges of the human mind and the possibilities for healing, awareness, compassion, and inner transformation in today's world. At a time when many people are carrying emotional burdens, uncertainty, loneliness, anxiety, and suffering in visible and invisible ways. This series attempts to offer a quiet space for reflection inspired by the timeless wisdom of the Dhamma. During this Vesak month, we are specially blessed to host a meaningful and timely conversation on the theme Mindfulness, a response to human suffering. Mindfulness today is spoken in many contexts, from mental health and education to medicine, leadership, and spiritual practice. Yet beyond techniques and terminology lies a deeper question: how can mindful awareness help human beings meet suffering with wisdom, compassion, clarity, and humanity? To guide us in reflecting on this important theme, we are deeply honored to have with us two distinguished speakers who bring both scholarly insight and lived contemplative experience. First, we warmly welcome Chris Cullen from the University of Oxford, whose work and engagement with mindfulness and contemplative studies have contributed greatly to bridging academic inquiry with human being, well-being, and inner development. Chris is a mindfulness teacher, psychotherapist, and a trainer who teaches Buddhist psychology and mindfulness-based cognitive therapy. He is also a co-founder of the Mindfulness in Schools project in the UK and has contributed to mindfulness programs within educational, therapeutic, and public service settings, including the Westminster Parliament. He was also a co-founder of the Mindfulness Initiative, which supported the creation of the UK All-Party Parliamentary Group on Mindfulness. We are also deeply honored to welcome Venerable Maharagama Ananda Thera of the Vinaya Lankararama Temple in Pokunuvita Horana, whose teachings and spiritual guidance continue to illuminate the relevance of Buddhist wisdom in responding to the complexities and suffering of modern life. We are grateful to both speakers for joining us this evening and for sharing their time, wisdom, and reflections with all of us. May this dialogue become not merely an intellectual discussion, but also an opportunity for deep listening, shared reflection, and inner awakening. Now, I would like to invite Venerable Maharagama Ananda Thera to commence the dialogue with Chris Cullen. Thank you.
Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Very good afternoon to everyone. So we are privileged to have Dr. Chris Cullen today in this very important dialogue. As Dr. Charika mentioned about the background of this dialogue, so today we have a very important topic which runs as mindfulness, a response to human suffering. So we are talking about this topic. We are having a conversation about this topic based on Buddhist philosophy and Buddhist teachings. We know the Buddha has said in one discourse, arising, only the dukkha is arising. Ceasing, only the dukkha is ceasing. There's nothing substantial in this world. So based on that, dear Dhamma friends, Each and every teaching of the Buddha has a certain depth which we should understand in detail. And not only we are talking about the depth, when we are conveying a message, it should be accessible to the people who are listening to that. So, to initiate this dialogue, Dr. Chris, so I would like to ask you one question, raise one question like this. How do you define mindfulness in a way that preserves its depth while making it accessible in modern therapeutic context? I think you have answers.
Thank you, Bante, and hello, everyone. What a privilege to be part of this dialogue today. And I greatly appreciate the invitation and the opportunity also to speak with you and reflect on these profound themes, Bante. And also really appreciating this question that you've raised. I really agree about the emphasis on accessibility in the Buddha's teachings, this principle of upaya. So, speaking in a way appropriate to the particular context. And, what that for me really points to is that how we describe mindfulness may need to vary or will need to vary according to the particular context in which we're doing that. And of course, when we look at the discourses, the Buddha never in the discourses defines mindfulness. He applies it and points to its dependent co-arising relationship with other qualities like kindness or like attention, like the equanimity. And so part of what we've seen in the contemporary, more secular mindfulness movement is the development of ways of speaking about mindfulness that are attuned to particular contexts, that are seeking to make mindfulness understandable and useful to particular contexts. So, for instance, when I began practicing mindfulness when I was a school teacher, to talk about mindfulness to a group of 13-year-old children requires one kind of language for mindfulness. To talk about mindfulness as we do in the UK when speaking to a group of people with chronic depression, to talk about mindfulness when speaking to people on a meditation retreat, these require a language and a vocabulary that is particular to that context, accessible to that context. So I might, with in a school's context, talk about mindfulness as present moment awareness, and that's a very kind of simple but profound description, invitation, present moment awareness. In the therapeutic context of mindfulness-based cognitive therapy, we talk about mindfulness as a way of paying attention in the present moment on purpose and non-judgmentally. In a Dhamma retreat context, one might speak about mindfulness as the path to the deathless, to Nibbana. And so our definitions are appropriately attuned to the particular context or the particular audience we're speaking to, so as to maximize the principle, Bante, that you spoke about of accessibility. So that's the approach that I think has really been emerging in the uh, the contemporary discussions about how to speak about what mindfulness is.
Yes, I agree, Dr. Chris. What you exactly said is correct. So, going back to the topic that we are discussing today, mindfulness response to human suffering. So, this is a sort of response that we are implementing to have peace and some consolation in our mind. So, we all are doing all these things, be it mindfulness practice or insightful meditation or whatever you name it. But we all are doing this to help people, to help the society at the end of the day. So, people might question this does this mindfulness can merely help people, or will it go to the extent that it would transform the things that we need to be transformed, that we expect to be transformed? So, some kind of transformation is expected by practicing this mindfulness, if I'm not mistaken. So, I'd like to raise my next question like this: does mindfulness merely help people cope with suffering, or can it fundamentally transform suffering itself? So, where do you stand on this, Dr. Chris?
Thank you for this really important question. Of course, society is made up of individuals and is made up of the relationships that individuals have with each other. And so, uh, even when our practice is focused on our own healing, our own uh, gradual liberation from patterns of reactivity and suffering, that in itself, in my view, is a contribution to society. That to if you like, unlearn or release are the patterns of behavior, of thinking, of action, of speech that generate suffering in, my life and in my relationships. That has a contribution to the larger network of human relating and within families, within workplaces, and within society. And so in a certain way, it feels important not to create a false dichotomy between individual practice and society. Individual practice can be a contribution to society. Now, of course, the Buddha was teaching in a context where the larger social units were the village or the city. He didn't have, doesn't speak about a kind of global, interconnected, um, world in that particular way. But when we start to practice mindfulness and start to feel our bodies more deeply, to feel the sense of the body sitting, maybe as your body is, as our bodies are doing right now, sitting in chairs and just feeling the body. We of course feel the impact of global events, of societal currents and trends and traumas. And so in a sense, it's no surprise that as mindfulness has moved into an increasingly globalized world, there is a social and environmental, ecological awareness of suffering that becomes very obvious as a theme that needs mindful attention, that needs uh, mindful relationships, mindful communities, mindful workplaces, mindful education systems, a more mindful politics. And so, in a sense, there's no, in my understanding, there's no limit to the potential of mindfulness to be a force for healing and progressive liberation within society from the patterns of greed, hatred, and delusion that seem so often to govern our world.
Yes, you just mentioned about Dr. Chris about the liberation, the liberative aspect of this religion and the Buddhism along with. So, as a whole, we know that the Buddha's teaching is a very profound teaching focused at liberation. For such philosophies, we call salvific philosophies, or which has some soteriology that we should speak out of. So, some earlier, this meditative practice, be it mindfulness or insight meditation, they were at the hands of yogis, the meditative practitioners. But nowadays, it has become so popular among even the busiest people in the world. They might turn towards the mindfulness to have some solace or some release or peace of mind. So, in this context, Dr. Chris, one might question that are we going to dilute or are we going to undermine this salvific aspect of mindfulness when we are adopting it in today's world? So, may I ask you this question from you? Is there a risk that the modern clinical mindfulness programs dilute the salvific intent found in the early Buddhist teachings? What is your view on this?
Thank you, Bante, for another such important and profound question. Personally, I have no doubt about the salvific potential of mindfulness, of how profound the potential transformation of suffering is that can come through developing a mindfulness practice. Again, of course, it feels important uh, to remember the Buddha's guideline about skillful means, skillful intention that is appropriate to context. And this is part of what my understanding of the Buddha's word sampajana. So often the Buddha speaks about sati sampajana. So mindfulness, sati, sampajana, one of the meanings of that is appropriate to context, you know, situationally intelligent, we could say. And when in the UK we have groups of patients with chronic depression who have suffered with 3 or more episodes of depression. What does sampajana look like in terms of how we speak about mindfulness, how we inspire people to continue with mindfulness practice? Well, it looks a lot like the offering the possibility of alleviating suffering, reducing the intensity of suffering, you know, giving some potential not just to keep going back into depressive relapse. And so that's a very particular kind of intention or situational awareness of what's appropriate in that context. Well, alleviating suffering, lessening suffering. Is that the last word on what mindfulness can do? It is absolutely not, because mindfulness has the potential to realize for the realization of nibbana. But in the context of a school, or in the context of a workplace, or in the context of a health care setting in a secular society, that to speak about nibbana might well put people off, might well imply that mindfulness is only useful if you become a Buddhist. Whereas actually, part of what we've seen in contemporary mindfulness is this is something that can be practiced by people from many different spiritual, religious, secular traditions, and they can find it profoundly helpful. So again, this theme of appropriateness to context, I think, rather than creating a false dichotomy that says, it's either therapeutic or it's salvific. What if the people can start with a therapeutic use of mindfulness that may over time mature and deepen into a possibility of a greater and more profound liberation?
Yes, what you said was exactly correct because you need to start, be it salvific or, the therapeutic. It is mindfulness and at the end of the day. So the important point is that we should start that. So I accept that as a fact, Dr. Chris. And here I would like to raise another question. We know that being a soteriological path, this Buddhist path, which is a gradual path, so it starts from a very less depth and it goes to a very higher depths. So we know that there's a very popular path towards Nibbana, starting from Sila, Samadhi, and Panya. Sila is the morality, Samadhi is the mindfulness or the concentration, and it ends with the insight. So the topic that we are talking about today, it belongs to the second step, which is mindfulness, which is samadhi. So when somebody starts practicing this second step without stepping into the first, which is the morality, one might have some confusion in his mind whether it would be successful because the path starts from this, but I'm starting with the second. So what I need to raise here is, Dr. Chris, can mindfulness be truly effective without an ethical foundation to which we call morality, such as compassion or right intention? So, what do you think about? Can we really start with the second step without stepping into the first? Where do you stand on this?
Thank you, Bante. I'm really appreciating these questions, which feel so important. Um, uh, my experience is that we can't teach mindfulness divorced from ethics. And the Buddha draws such an important distinction between mindfulness, sati, and attention, manasikara, and acknowledges that attention can be wholesomely flavored. So it can be flavored with wholesome qualities such as compassion, such as right intention, such as kindness, such as equanimity. But attention, as we know, can also be unwholesomely flavored with judgment, with cruelty, with indifference. And that mindfulness is intrinsically wholesome. It's the most potentially profoundly wholesome shaping of this quality, this ethically variable quality of attention. And it's sometimes secular programs of mindfulness are sometimes misunderstood as just starting with samadhi, as just starting with the second aspect of that eightfold path understanding of sila, ethics, samadhi, mental training, panya, insight. In fact, as John Kabat-Zinn, Professor John Kabat-Zinn, who I think has done one of these talks before, I'm sure he will have said, as he often does, that if attention is not ethical, if it is not kind, if it is not shaped by goodwill, then it's not really mindfulness. And here at Oxford University, in the mindfulness training that we offer for teachers of mindfulness-based cognitive therapy, we always say that the ethics starts from how you relate to people, even before the mindfulness course has begun. In the emails you might exchange with uh, participants for your course, certainly in how you relate to them in the first session of an 8-week course, or how you respond during the 8 weeks to problems that they raise or difficulties they're encountering. The ethics is, we could say, built in. It is implicit. We don't start a mindfulness course by doing a PowerPoint presentation on the 5 precepts, which would be to make it explicit. Does that mean that the course is not ethical? No, not at all. It's profoundly ethical, but it's a relational ethic. It's an ethic shaped by the Brahma Viharas of kindness, of compassion, as you mentioned, of appreciative joy, of equanimity, and that it's more in this implicit relational uh, uh, shaping of intention by a mindfulness teacher. That is how the ethics in these secular contexts, such as teaching on the NHS, such as teaching mindfulness in schools, that's how the ethic is primarily conveyed. This may, of course, in due course, lead people to develop an interest in Buddhism and the more explicit ethics present in the 5 precepts. But that needs to start somewhere, and that start is really in the lived experience of ethics and relating through the whole way in which teachers teach mindfulness in courses in secular settings.
Uh, Clear enough, Dr. Chris. Yes, actually, the uh, ethics is very important in any science or any art or any profession, because even the professional counsellors they have a set of ethics that they should really follow. So that is clear enough. So moral philosophy or the moral background is very important for any profession. So with that, I would like to take this discussion to another direction, Dr. Chris. So we know that although we teach a science or any art or any subject to people, there are ways that they take it, because based on their context and their capabilities, their patterns of thinking, they might portray is that it has different things, although we teach one subject. So there are so many misunderstandings in understanding a subject in the world. So when it comes to the mindfulness, Dr. Chris, some people think that mindfulness it merely means the emptying the mind. That means making your mind a vacuum. Or sometimes they might think it is just relaxing the mind, it is mindfulness. And sometimes some people would take it as positive thinking. The mere positive thinking is mindfulness. And another group of people would just think that mindfulness is just a quick self-help tool, because there are so many self-help books, tools, and so many things in the world. So there are so many misunderstandings. So I would like to raise this question from you. What are the most common misunderstandings about mindfulness that limit the potential of the mindfulness in today's context? Where do you stand on this?
Again, I really appreciate that question, which feels very relevant. as mindfulness kind of spreads within society and gets adopted into different cultures from the ones in which it arose. Um, uh, for me, I think the misunderstanding of mindfulness as just being attention is perhaps the most pervasive misunderstanding. So that sense that it's sometimes presented as, well, just feel 5 breaths in a row, or just uh, become more focused on what you're doing, and that is mindfulness. Um, you know, that of course misses out the ethical dimension that is so intrinsic to mindfulness. And it's possible to use attention and even self-help training of attention for very unethical purposes. One could imagine somebody training their attention um, and in a sense benefiting from more focused attention, but using it to cause harm to other people, whether in their workplace or in their activities, in their abuse of nature, of the environment. Uh, and the Buddha's placing of right livelihood within the Eightfold Path really emphasizes that what we do, how we spend our lives, how we earn our money, is profoundly connected with the practice of mindfulness, rightly understood. And so for me, this ethical dimension feels so important to keep emphasizing that uh, uh, mindfulness is not just a quick training of attention. It's something that carries with it a depth and a commitment to relating to other people and to the natural world from an ethical perspective, that this is so important. Now, is that something that when introducing mindfulness to 8-year-olds in a primary school you start with? No, it starts as training the attention. It starts as getting used to feeling the breath and maybe counting breaths or learning to pay attention uh, to the breathing. When you're teaching, like I've been doing today, to some people from the world of business, do you start with the ethical piece? No, you start with the attention training piece because that's the most accessible. But it's so important that's not where you stop, that you do introduce over time and over a mindfulness course, you do introduce more and more sense of the ethos or the ethic that is so intrinsic to mindfulness. So for me, I think that's probably the fundamental misunderstanding that uh, uh, feels most important to address when presenting mindfulness in new and secular contexts.
Yes, actually, there's a multitude of misunderstandings about mindfulness in the world today. So it's very clear. And there's another very important subject that we should be extra careful when implementing mindfulness and introducing mindfulness practices towards them. What is that? Especially when it comes to trauma, the traumatic experience. Uh, so people think that this mindfulness can merely help them be whatever the situation they are in. We can just help them with mindfulness, but it is not the case because trauma-sensitive mindfulness must prioritize some things, just like safety, grounding, and emotional stability of the audience. So I would like to raise this question from you: how should mindfulness be adapted when working with individuals who have experienced trauma or the traumatic experience at any point of their life? How do you come to this point, Dr. Chris?
Uh, it's such an important question. And an evolving understanding as you know, mindfulness practice comes more and more into ethical and therapeutic contexts. And again, uh, you know, we can turn to the Buddha's teachings for guidance about this. And you use the word grounding. Uh, and I think of how in the first centuries of after the Buddha's death, the image that was used to represent the Buddha was the image of his feet. Before any statues of the Buddha were created, there was the image of the Buddha's feet as a way of representing the Buddha. And uh, you know, the sanity of learning to ground. We could say learning to regulate the nervous system by grounding. It's said that as we know, on the night of the Buddha's awakening, when confronted with Mara, trying to distract, trying to prevent the Buddha's enlightenment, what did the Buddha do? He touched the earth. And the wisdom of grounding, of paying attention in a very practical way to the contact that feet are making with ground. I often say to people, feel your heels on the ground. The sensations of sitting on the chair, you know, the sense of the support that the ground and the chair are providing. This can begin, and in the work that I do as a trauma psychotherapist, with people who've been through both really shocking events or multiple shocking events, or who have had very difficult childhoods and upbringings, giving some guidance about the possibility of regulating the nervous system through grounding, through mindfulness of breathing, through establishing some degree of steadying, some degree of reconnecting with their bodies in a grounding way. That's a very foundational aspect of mindfulness in the presence of trauma. That's, of course, not where it ends. And you know, the usually when people who have experienced, those of us who've experienced a lot of trauma, are learning mindfulness, it's very helpful to have a mindfulness-based psychotherapist or a mindfulness teacher or a monastic practitioner to provide guidance, because so often that sense of a safe relationship with a therapist, with a teacher, is also very therapeutic in terms of the healing of trauma. At the deeper levels, trauma disrupts the sense of self. It disrupts the sense of identity, or it leads to what the Buddha would call Sakkaya Ditthi, unhelpful Sakkaya Ditthi beliefs about myself. There's something wrong with me. There's something defective with me. I'm fundamentally broken. These would be some of the self-beliefs, the Sakkaya Ditthi, that trauma can give rise to, particularly developmental trauma that's arisen from dysfunctions in early relationships with parents and caregivers. And I think the best mindfulness-based trauma psychotherapies also involve an exploration of those deeper self-views that are so profoundly influential in prolonging the experience of developmental trauma. So there is, in a certain way, a kind of self-regulating aspect to mindfulness in relation to trauma, grounding, breathing, allowing, steadying. And then there's an insight aspect to the appropriateness of mindfulness for trauma, which is really beginning to inquire into who is it that I'm believing myself to be as a result of what I've experienced. There's a lot that could be said on that topic, but those are a few initial thoughts.
What you mean to say is that we have to be extra careful when dealing with the trauma-stricken individuals. So, because some individuals may feel overwhelmed by intense inward attention if we continue with this continuous mindfulness continuously. So, coming back to the topic that we are talking about today, the mindfulness as a response to the human suffering. So there are two kinds of suffering the people have identified in the world according to the general knowledge. That is the individual suffering and the structural or societal forms of suffering. So I would like to know from you, Dr. Chris, can mindfulness address not only individual suffering, but also structural or societal forms of suffering in the world? What do you think about this?
Again, I'm really appreciating in our conversation today this you're highlighting both of the individual and also of the collective, the societal, even the global. And of course, in the Four Noble Truths, uh, the Buddha pinpoints the origin of suffering, the origin of the distress that we experience and that can be so profoundly shaping and destructive in the societal, the relational, the community, the global. And the second noble truth that the Buddha points to this profound interrelationship between distress and reactivity. Tanha can be translated as craving or aversion, as we know, but in the contemporary mindfulness movement is often translated as reactivity, the reactivity to unpleasant, to pleasant, to neutral experience. And we can see that this, I sometimes in teaching this at Oxford University, talk about that as an algorithm that codes the whole of human distress, that there is this algorithm that says distress is dependent on the degree of reactivity. And we only need to see the global news on every day to see how destructive reactivity is within our world. And part of the privilege of teaching mindfulness to politicians in Westminster over the last 13 years has been to be part of conversations with them about how mindfulness is both relevant for reducing individual reactivity and therefore individual suffering, whether inside myself or in my relationship with those around me, but also the potential of a more mindful politics that is less driven by reactivity, that is less driven by the reactive reflexes of greed, of hatred, and delusion, that allows more space for recognition of other people's humanity, of other people's suffering, of the suffering of the natural world, and of other forms of life. And so it profoundly see that, the mindfulness has the potential both to be a response to individual suffering, family suffering, community suffering, societal suffering, global suffering, and that the Buddha's algorithm of pointing to tanha, of reactivity as that which gives rise to distress and suffering, that is really the key for understanding how mindfulness can be profoundly helpful in all these different domains, whether the individual or the collective.
Yes, actually, you spoke about the algorithm of this mindfulness and how to identify these correctly. So we know that obviously there's a transformative aspect of mindfulness, which is very important. We expect to transform things while practicing mindfulness. But there's a question, there's a problem. To what extent we can measure this transformative aspect of mindfulness? Because if somebody were to believe in something, they should have an idea, they should measure something and quantify something and identify what is really beneficial for them. So, science can measure many psychological and neurological effects of mindfulness, but we don't know to what extent. Because of that, some problems arise. So I'd like to raise this question from you, Dr. Chris. To what extent can the transformative aspect of mindfulness be captured through scientific research so that we can have good understanding and some reliability on this mindfulness practice? What do you think about this aspect of this problem?
Well, it's such an interesting question. And just to start with my personal position about this, I don't think that the full transformational potential of mindfulness can be captured by science. The urge to measure everything is uh, has kind of really come out of a Western scientific paradigm and can sometimes give rise to a kind of omnipotence where scientists believe, as they sometimes say here at Oxford, if you treasure it, you measure it, and that the mindfulness can be and its potential can be needs to be able to be measurable to be true. I think it's a uh, a very interesting uh, word that the Buddha used to describe uh, qualities like mindfulness and kindness and compassion and equanimity. He called them appamana. One of the translations of that is immeasurable. Immeasurable. They can't be measured. You know, they're far more profound than can be captured even with the latest brain scanner or psychological survey. So I think again, the science of mindfulness can be useful, and in a certain way, it's been surprising how much can be measured. It's certainly been very useful for bringing mindfulness into contexts like healthcare systems, schools, um, workplaces, that the science can show benefits from mindfulness practice and can measure them in a repeatable way with randomized controlled trials, which is the gold standard of scientific research. And that's very encouraging. But can science measure the profoundest impacts of mindfulness? Absolutely not, because the most profound potential of mindfulness is appamana, is immeasurable by its very nature.
There are four immeasurables the Buddha has mentioned: metta, karuna, mudita, and upekkha. So we understand that very clearly. And I'd like to raise one more question from you, Dr. Chris. We talk about mindfulness and we talk about adopting mindfulness to have some beneficial results in our day-to-day life. So, what does it mean to truly integrate mindfulness into everyday life of ours beyond formal meditation? That means, how should we take our lives beyond the meditation cushion, not without confining to the cushion of meditation, that we go to one place and we practice mindfulness. And after this meditation session, everything is over. Not like that. So without sticking to that duration of time, how can we adapt the mindfulness to our day-to-day practice? What do you think about this, Dr.
Thank you for this question. And thankfully, the Buddha gave the most uh, detailed and comprehensive response to exactly that question by contextualizing mindfulness within an eightfold path that has these domains of ethics as its foundation, of mental training that arises and becomes possible on the basis of ethical intentions or seeking to live a more ethical life, and that gives rise over time to insight and understanding that then also that deepening understanding uh, shapes how we live, shapes our ethics, and informs our mental training. And so, how can we integrate mindfulness more fully into our lives? Well, uh, the Buddha's teaching of the Eightfold Path, this integrated, we could call it an integrated training program that has these aspects of ethics, of mental training, and we could include in that mental training aspect this capacity for the regulating of the nervous system, the coming into a more homeostatic sense of balance and capacity in ourselves, and how that gives rise to a deepening of understanding that can inspire the whole of our practice and the gradual reorientation of how we live each moment towards these liberating principles and potentials. Well, this is really the the appropriate way of living a more mindful life, including all these dimensions. And that to a certain extent, I see this in people who do 8-week mindfulness courses here in Oxford or on the National Health Service here in the UK, that it does change. Doing an 8-week course changes how people live, changes the values that they recognize as important to live by, changes the way they relate to their own minds and bodies in terms of using practice for self-regulation and inquiry, and changes their understanding of their experience, their insight into their experience in ways that are more aligned with a sense of freedom, a sense of connection, a sense of open-heartedness, a sense of kindness and compassion, as well as equanimity. And for all of us, this is a lifetime's journey. We're all, those of us practicing mindfulness, fellow travelers on a path into a gradual and progressive awakening to the deepest potential for human beings and for human flourishing.
Wrap things up, Dr. Chris, so I would like to have a remark like this. I have heard one very famous scholar had said, "We are not mindful because our minds are full. Our minds are full of all dirt. That is why we are not mindful." This problem has become a global problem. So with the globalization and everything, so now it has come to the point that people have started saying the suffering is also global, to which we call global suffering. So this mindfulness will likely continue expanding in healthcare, education, and social leadership, and whatever the field it takes. So its future value depends on whether it remains connected to the ethics, as you just correctly said, compassion and human flourishing, rather than becoming merely commercialized at the hands of few people. So properly understood, mindfulness can contribute meaningfully to both personal and collective well-being, as I believe. So, my question is the last question I would like to raise from you, Dr. Chris. What do you see as the future of mindfulness in addressing global suffering? Where do you stand on this?
Well, we need both to have a sense of the potential of mindfulness, the possibility that mindfulness offers for addressing individual, collective, global suffering, and take one step at a time, because it's not easy to see how we get from where we are now to mindfulness making a global impact. But I think this is where the secular mindfulness movement is trying to provide steps that give access to mindfulness to more and more people in society. You know, people who don't call themselves Buddhist, who may never have even kind of heard the Buddha's teaching, and might reject an invitation to become a Buddhist. But still, mindfulness can have a potential to lessen the force of reactivity in their lives and open up more possibility for compassion and kindness and equanimity. And so I think that these forms that mindfulness is taking in schools, in healthcare settings, in workplaces, in secular societies, perhaps has can contribute to the larger spread of mindfulness within across the world. Is secular mindfulness the only way of doing that? Absolutely not. We need to keep returning to, as we do here in Oxford, the Buddha's teaching and understanding of mindfulness as practiced over the last 2,600 years, for guidance, for cautions, for the setting of wise intention. But perhaps the secular mindfulness movement can play some role in helping to make mindfulness more accessible and available across the world.
Yes, thank you very much, Dr. Chris. Such a wonderful dialogue we had with you, with such fruitful insights which you take us to. So I'm done with the points that I wanted to make. So I got some important insights and some practical solutions, some practical information from you with your experience and everything. I think it's over to Dr. Charika to have a comment on this.
Could I just come in
Thank you very
but
much,
before
Venerable
could I just
Anandathera and Dr. Chris Cullen for this amazing dialogue. So as we come to the end of this evening's dialogue, we would like to express our heartfelt gratitude to both our esteemed speakers for sharing their wisdom, experience, and reflections with such generosity and sincerity. Our sincere thanks to Chris Cullen for bringing valuable insights from the fields of mindfulness, psychotherapy, and contemplative practice, and for helping us understand how mindful awareness can respond compassionately to the suffering and emotional challenges of contemporary life. We also offer our deepest gratitude to Venerable Dr. Maharagama Anandathera for grounding us in the timeless wisdom of the Dhamma and reminding us of the profound relevance of Buddhist teachings in cultivating inner peace, compassion, and clarity amidst the complexities of the modern world. This evening's dialogue has reminded us that mindfulness is not merely a technique, but a way of living with awareness, humanity, compassion, and responsibility towards ourselves and others. We thank all those who joined us this evening and contributed through your presence, listening, and reflection. May the insights shared by by the two speakers continue to inspire us towards healing the mind, nurturing compassionate communities, and walking the path of awakening with greater wisdom and understanding. Thank you. May you all be well, happy, and peaceful.
Thank you. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.